INS. He sued INS. Like, who does that? If you have an illegal status in the United States, who sues INS? Simon Guobadia. He sued INS, so no wonder he's on their radar. They're in offensive mode right now, and he is on their radar. Nobody has to call ICE on Simon. I'm Layla Lynn. I do celebrity news and nostalgia, and today we're going to take it back. We're going to take it back to the 80s, back to when Portia was a pup and what Simon was doing back then. So if you like this type of content, click the thumbs up button, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, share the video, do all the YouTube things, and let's get into it. In these court documents, he's basically making a request to vacate the previous denial of his request for naturalization services. Now, naturalization is different from having like a green card or a permanent residency in the United States. He wants to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. It was previously denied, and in this court record, he's requesting to vacate the denial. Forget about that. Forget about that time you told me no and say yes. That's what's going on in these documents. It says this is the order. This matter appears before the court on respondent's motion to dismiss for the following reasons. The court grants the USCIS motion and dismisses Simon's case. So he lost this case. But I think it's a very interesting court case. His arguments are very interesting to me. So the case arises out of Simon's application for U.S. citizenship and naturalization. The INS department previously denied his application on July 27, 2022. He requested a hearing on this decision, and the denial was reaffirmed. So they're denying him for the second time. And the court derives the following facts from his complaint and its attachments. And I know a lot of times people attach so much proof to their court documents, so much proof to their lawsuit, and they're saying your lawsuit and its attachments are denied. Forget what you attached. It's all denied. They say the facts are Simon is a Nigerian citizen. Simon first entered the United States on August 11th, 1982. Now, I looked up his birthday. It says it was 1964. Now, this is when Portia was a pup, 1982. I don't even know if Portia was born. This is when Portia was a pup, if she was born. And he had been scamming since then. And he would have been 18 in 1982. And they said he overstayed his visitor visa. However, and in 1985, INS denied his application for adjustment of status. So this is around college age for Simon, which is not unusual for someone around 18, 19, someone from another country to want to enter the U.S., whether they're in college or they're starting their career. He's trying to enter the U.S. as a young man and start whatever it is that he's going to do. And they say he was declared deportable and voluntarily departed from the United States on December 28, 1985. So this would have been when he was around 23. He voluntarily departed. But he re-entered the United States on June 1986. He said, y'all got him messed up. He went home, thought about it, and said, y'all got him messed up. So he came back in June 1986. And Simon again overstayed his 6-month visitor visa. In September 1987, Simon was arrested for bank and credit card fraud and pleaded guilty to a felony offense. So this is why they call Simon a scammer, because he was arrested for bank and credit card fraud and pleaded guilty to a felony offense. He was arrested in January 1989 for unauthorized use of a vehicle, and again in May 1990 for fraud. Thereafter, the agency began removal proceedings. In January 1991, Simon committed another felony offense, again, credit card fraud. In April 1991, an immigration judge held a hearing and ordered Simon to be deported. Then on March 4th, 1992, Simon was deported and physically removed from the United States. So they put him on that plane. And sent him back to his country. Now, I just want to pause and say this. I feel like, we're laughing and joking about this situation because there is some humor in it. Like, his audacity has become humorous at this point because he has a lot of it. But at the same time, I do have to mention, I have seen when they put those people on the planes, they are putting them in chains. And the White House posted ASMR of them putting people in chains on a plane and sending them back to their country. I don't think it's ASMR. I don't think there's anything enjoyable about seeing people in chains. And even in this moment, and for me, thinking of Simon being in chains right now, it is disturbing. It's a disturbing image. But at the same time, this channel is kind of like a light channel. We talk about the housewives and things like that. So if it seems like I find humor in it, I find humor in Simon's audacity, not the thought or image of him being in chains right now. That thought is actually very disturbing. Now, before this is the tricky part. Because there's two Simons. There's two Simons. They say before March 1992 removal, however, on October 24th, 1988, Simon used a different identity to seek temporary resident status under the Special Agricultural Worker Program. He also did not include his criminal history on his SAW application. When his SAW application was approved with these misrepresentations and omissions, he was given a registration card as a temporary resident on July 25th, 1991. So y'all have to keep in mind, two things are happening because there are two Simons. One Simon is getting deported. He was supposed to be deported in March of 1992. And to clarify, I say there are two Simons, but it's actually a Simon and an Eeyore. And then later on in 2022, he merged the two people. But prior to March of 92, the other Simon got his temporary residency application approved. So the second Simon is doing good. The second Simon is becoming a temporary resident. And as part of the SAW immigration benefits, the second Simon's temporary resident status was automatically converted to permanent resident status following the waiting period. So Simon number two made it. Simon number two is a permanent resident of the United States. So I've seen comments about people saying he married Fallon or married Portia to become a permanent resident. But that's not the case because he is already. The second Simon is a permanent resident of the United States. Now, he received his permanent residency card on April 27, 1992, 26 days after the first Simon had been deported under his other undisclosed identity. So he has a whole nother name, whole other identity. Simon number one was deported 26 days before Simon number two was granted permanent residency status. And so, yes, in a way, you could say that he scammed his way into the United States. But for me, I have to be honest with you guys, I'm not really judging him because I feel like the whole immigration process, when it comes to Black people and people of African descent, people with dark skin, the whole thing is a scam. America is a scam for people with dark skin. And so I'm not judging Simon. I'm not judging Simon for trying to scam. At that point, when it came to INS and things like that, I wasn't judging Simon. I'm judging now. INS, I can't judge. Now, let's move forward. The documents move forward about 24 years. We go from 1992 to 2016. It says on December 22nd, 2016, Simon applied for naturalization under his second identity. The second one is the good one, and was denied because his temporary resident status was unlawfully granted. Then 4 years later, on December 31st, 2020, Simon filed another application for naturalization. Following an interview with Simon, USCIS again denied Simon's naturalization application. He wants to become a citizen, not just a permanent resident, but a citizen, and it's being denied. USCIS explained that he was ineligible because he had not been lawfully admitted for permanent residence. His temporary resident status, achieved through the SAW program and benefits, had been based on a different identity. It's based on Simon number two. And disqualifying criminal inadmissibility that was willfully concealed. He didn't put his criminal history on his second identity. So on October 24th, 2022, Simon requested a hearing on this decision, and USCIS reaffirmed the denial of his naturalization application on November 15th, 2022. Simon just can't leave it alone. He can't leave well enough alone. He got this permanent residency. However, he got it. Apparently, it was unlawful. According to the courts, they are calling it unlawful, but he just can't leave it alone. He has to have permanent residency because he doesn't want to ever face being deported, which is what he is now facing. Now, just last year, on March 13th, 2023, Simon filed the instant complaint in this court and asked the court to vacate the denial. Forget about that. Forget about it. Forget about the denial and remand with instructions to grant his application. Now, I want to get into his argument on why the USCIS should grant his application because Simon has a lot of nerve. It says Simon first argues that he should be granted naturalization because Immigration Services has not raised any concerns about his permanent resident status for 3 decades. For 30 years, y'all ain't say nothing about his permanent resident status, so y'all shouldn't deny his request for naturalization now because it's been 30 years and y'all ain't do nothing. That's his first argument, which to me, I feel like I would try to fly under the radar. If I got into the US as a permanent resident under my second identity, I would just leave it at that. But for some reason, he wants to become a US citizen. And he's saying that for 30 years, y'all didn't say anything about his permanent residency being unlawful. So why y'all saying something now? He says no immigration official has contended that he was anything but a personally lawfully granted permanent resident status. Now, number two, his second argument, he argues that he should not be made to bear the burden of the government's mistakes. Basically saying y'all fell for it and y'all let it go for 30 years. So it's not my problem now. I shouldn't carry the burden of y'all's mistake when y'all fell for my scamming 30 years ago. I told y'all he got a lot of nerve, and that's where I find humor because Simon got a lot of nerve. He argues that the appropriate remedy for these issues regarding his SAW application would have been to terminate his temporary resident status, and he should not be denied naturalization now. So because they didn't terminate his temporary resident status when they felt like he was scamming 30 years ago, they shouldn't punish him now. But the court finds petitioner's arguments to be unpersuasive. They're unpersuasive. The court is not falling for it. They say the court rejects the suggestion that USCIS is at fault for not discovering petitioner's own misrepresentations and omissions. Simon, in essence, asked the court to allow USCIS's previous treatment of his immigration status to ratify his unlawfully obtained permanent residency. The court refuses to do so. They refuse to do so. And this is even before the administration change, which I'm not a fan of this new administration. If I have never said that before on my YouTube, I know I've said it on my Instagram. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I feel like our country is in trouble. But even under Biden, our INS was not going for it. They were not going for this argument that you made a mistake and it's not my fault. It's not my burden to carry your mistake. They weren't going for it even then before the administration change. And now that it changed, the INS is on the offense. They're looking for people like Simon to be sure. And they found him because he want to go to court. Or it is petitioner who unquestionably holds the imposed burden of proof. So they're saying it's up to him to prove that he's here legally as a permanent resident. And he can't prove that because he's not here legally as a permanent resident. He's here unlawfully as a permanent resident. They say, moreover, Simon lacked any legal support for his argument that as an operation of law, he achieved lawful, keyword lawful, permanent resident status by the agency not previously having corrected his status. To the contrary, legal authorities suggest that achieving permanent residence through an unlawful means is a basis for denying naturalization. So they are denying his. And so it seems like the ante has been upped. At that point, it was a basis for denying naturalization, like scamming, basically. If you've been scamming, we can deny your naturalization. But now it's like ante up. Now, if you've been scamming, we can deport you. because you're not here legally. Request to become a naturalized U.S. citizen because he's here unlawfully. He's here as a permanent resident unlawfully. Now, the kicker is Simon also argues that the statement in his SAW application, whether fraudulent or not, this is a quote, whether fraudulent or not, cannot be used against him to deny immigration benefits because of confidentiality protections afforded to SAW applications. So because his SAW application is confidential, he's saying it doesn't matter whether his statements were fraudulent or not. And when I tell y'all, it takes a lot of nerve to make a statement like that. It really takes a lot of nerve. But the court concludes that Simon's argument misses the mark. USCIS did not deny Simon's application based on protected information in his SAW application. USCIS denied his application based on its own investigation during his naturalization application process. So it's not going to happen. Conclusion. For the foregoing reasons, the court grants USCIS's motion to dismiss and dismisses Simon's case. Now, if you made it this far to the end of the video, then I think you like my content. So make sure you subscribe and check out my channel. I have over 1,000 videos on my channel. Check out my playlist and my podcast, and I assure you, you will like more of my content.